You're listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajin, making the real estate journey accessible to anyone.
All right, back at it again, Guts and Grind. So we're on our episode for this week, and we are planning to cover on how to find a good tenant. That is what we're going to be diving into this week. Sajin, I'm here with my property brother, Sajin Abraham.
What's up, man? What's up? How you doing?
Good, dude. Hey, do people tell you that we look like each other?
Yeah, I get it all the time. I'm like, okay. I mean, I kind of see it.
We're the
You're,
Indian
you're like a
property.
you're like a better version. But I'll take it. It's a compliment for me, man.
I don't think so. We're just the property brothers. The Indian property brothers.
Man, we're gonna get sued. If you keep saying that, we're gonna get sued.
I added Indian in front of it.
Oh, there it is.
It's mine. Oh man. Cool, man. Well, thanks for joining, dude. How's everything been going, dude? You good?
Yeah, everything's good. Well, like it's allergy season, right?
Yeah.
And so usually I get it I always get it every season. And then it didn't come. It didn't hit me. And I was like, oh man, I missed it. I'm fine. Everything's good. And then like yesterday or the day before, it just punched me in the face. And I'm like, can't breathe and coughing. And like, this is not the season to be coughing when we're in a pandemic. People look at you funny,
Yeah.
So I'm just like staying home. And if I have to cough, I'm like running into a corner. But yeah, like it's annoying, but it's better than having COVID, I guess. I got tested twice just to be sure. And I'm negative. So that's good. And
Got the
my
brain
next
swab?
shot, my second shot is at the end of this month. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, nice. So you got your brain swabbed.
Yeah, exactly. They tickle my brain. So if I mix up my words, you know why.
Nice. Good, man. I'm glad everything's good. Yeah, I was wondering, you kind of under the weather, you sounded kind of nasally.
Yeah, a little congested. How about you, man? How's everything?
Good, dude. Same old, we're continuing on. I'm still looking for properties like we always do. We're working like we do. Weekends are busy. We're hanging tough. There may be some things that we're working on that I will maybe show here shortly. But yeah, dude, it's getting busy.
Good, man. Good. Busy's good. I always think it's a good place to be.
You have to be, man. You have to.
For sure.
With that said, dude, let's dive into this week's topic: finding a good tenant. You know what that's about, right?
Yeah. So everything we talked about before was the buildup of like, oh, we're getting a property and all that stuff. And you want the income producing and blah, 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 all that stuff. But those are all just numbers, right?
Yeah.
It's just like kind of numbers floating around in the wind. But the tenant is who's living there. They can make or break your deal. Like they could really keep it up and take care of the property, or they could ruin it and you lose all your profit. So this is it's a huge topic to talk about.
I think you hit it right on the nail. They can make or break a deal, or not even just a deal, but I feel like they can make or break your experience in the real estate investing game. Because I feel like there's a lot of people out there that start out in this journey of real estate investing. They may have just a bad tenant, just from placing a bad tenant or whatever, and it just leaves that bad taste in your mouth, right? And I've heard so many stories of people saying, yeah, they flooded my house, or they burned the kitchen down or whatever and left. I mean, unfortunately, they leave the owner with just a bag of crap to deal with, right? And it's just a lot of people that I've known got into the investment game, got out because of that first or just bad tenant. And I think this episode is more geared to showing how to find that good tenant. But also, even if you have those mishaps, I think those are just small setbacks when you look at the long journey. And I think that's what we've always mentioned. Look at this as a long ball game, and it's not a one quarter at a time. You have a full 4 quarters to get through when it comes to real estate. And so with some of that, I guess we start off with, hey, what are some of the things that you've went through, or what are some issues that you've experienced with your real estate investment journey?
Well, so like talking about you mentioned a bag of crap. Like what someone I know, their experience with being a landlord was kind of similar to mine in the sense that they moved and their previous house was like, okay, let's just turn it into a rental. So they were like accidental landlords, right?
Yeah.
And they rented it out and things were really good at the beginning. And then they became hoarders and there was like nowhere to walk. like those 4 people that lived there, but like everything was stacked on the beds. Like you wonder, like, where do these people sleep? To the point where like they were cutting holes in the wall and shoving garbage, things that they appreciated, but it was garbage, into the walls just to keep it. And it was just like, and that turned her away from being a realtor. I mean, not a realtor, a real estate investor, being a landlord. Like she just didn't want to do it anymore because of that one bad experience.
Oh,
And I can't knock anybody for, for doing that, right? I mean, like when you have a bad experience, it's hard to get back on the horse, right?
100%.
But yeah, but like for me, luckily, it's never been like that bad. It's never been crazy. I've had some issues and stuff, but some things to note, issues with tenants, if they're, the biggest things for me are like late rent. And there's things to mediate that where you have like late fees and stuff like that. But it's just that feeling of nervousness of like, oh man, you're late. How late are you going to be? How close are you going to get to the next month and how far behind? You start thinking like they're one like medical bill away from not being able to pay anything, And like, so you hope that your tenants have good money management and you hope that they could like pay on time. But that's the top dog for me, man. Like a late rent. And typically when my tenants pay late, they are really good about paying the late fees. So essentially it's like you're making more money for nothing. You've done no improvements, you've done nothing to the property, but you're earning a bit more money every month because they're paying late. I do feel guilty about it just because like, oh man, like they shouldn't be doing this to themselves. But they're adults, like they can make their own decisions. And if you want to pay late, like there's going to be a late fee.
I agree. Late fees is probably my biggest thing. And especially in this COVID era, I'm sure a lot of investors are kind of going through that struggle. And maybe not even getting their rent, right? And we've been fortunate to get, our tenants have been still paying, and again, some of them have got some late fees here and there. And of course, yeah, I mean, I would definitely, you're making extra money for that month, but I wouldn't want them to be in that situation because unfortunately it's going to put them back. It's going to put us back too, right? Because we have mortgages that we got to pay on these properties. But
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, late fees, 100%. Again, and then it's from there. That's probably your number one biggest.
Yeah, because like that's your income, right? Like if this is your full-time job, if they can't pay on time, then it kind of delays your stuff, right? Like if that's your income that you're concerned about, and they can't pay on time, then it kind of pushes you to be like, how am I going to pay on time, right? Luckily, that's not the case, but I know a lot of investors, that's just what it is, right?
Yeah.
The next thing that's kind of the next one that's an issue would be having messy tenants. For the most part, it's not a huge deal because it's not like I go to the properties or I live in the properties. But if they're keeping it messy, there's a high probability that when they leave, they're going to leave it messy as well. And there's security deposits and all that kind of stuff that kind of protect you from a messy place where you could just use that money to get cleaners to come do what they want to do. But sometimes messiness leads to like damage to the property or neglect to where like, oh, there was a mess there, so I didn't see that something was leaking or whatever it might be. So that's my number 2. Like having a messy tenant is kind of a no-no. Ways to mitigate that, like I use a realtor to find tenants for me. And sometimes like he'll ask the landlord previously, or sometimes like, how they were, or sometimes they'll just do a pop-in visit. Like not always do the pop-in visit, but say, hey, I'd like to come see your property right now. Because if it's always clean, they have nothing to worry about. But if they're like, oh, can you come on Tuesday? And say, why? Do you need time to clean up everything and stuff? And I'm not trying to sit here and say like I'm the most clean person here. Like, I mean, I got a huge mess behind me already, right? So I'm guilty of it too. But if you're looking for an ideal tenant, you want someone that's like nice and neat.
I don't know if we can screen for that, but so much, but it's going to be more, right? I mean, you're right. You're going to get those that are not going to be taking care of your property as good as we would.
Sure.
And you just kind of deal with that. And then some of that just because it's going to be normal wear and tear.
Yeah. I mean, those things I could accept. Normal wear and tear is fine. But like if there's excessive wear and tear on something because you're messy, that's kind of annoying, Yep. But again, it is what it is. The third thing would be being not communicative, where if there's an issue and you don't tell me about it, that's a problem. Like, I think as a tenant, they might think like, oh, I don't want to bother the landlord with this stuff. I don't want to look like that person that's always asking for something. But really, it's kind of important to know. Like if your toilet's running, that's a problem. Or if there's a crack somewhere, I need to figure out if that's a foundation issue. Or if your AC is about to blow out, like I'd rather preemptively fix it rather than replace it, right? So having a tenant that's willing to like be open and say, hey, here's the problem, it's invaluable, right? I mean, because like I need to know to be able to fix it.
I think you kind of hit it on it. It's some of it, unfortunately, you're not going to find out about it until like the person moves out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's kind of the name of the game, right? I mean, most people make, it depends on what the issue is, right? If it's a constant issue that affects them, if it's a toilet, something like that, 100%. If it's a crack in the wall but the roof is still up, you may not hear about it until you do a walkthrough personally.
That's true. That is true. That's true.
I think it depends on how big the issue and if it affects them. That's my experience, right? If it directly impacts them and the way they live in the house, then they'll let you know about it.
That's true. No, that's a very good point. That's very true. The last item would be lawn care, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but all of my properties are in HOAs, like homeowners associations. So I get the letter. Like if the lawn isn't cut, or if there's moss growing on a rock or something ridiculous, it's like I get the letter and I have to follow up and say, hey, mow your lawn, which is kind of, come on, so people that have pride in ownership, even if they're renting, like it's ideal to have someone that's like, I'm happy where I live and I want it to represent who I am too. That's the ideal tenant, really, because they'll treat the house as though it's theirs, right? And so, so lawn care is and really lawn care is only because, well, one thing, I don't want the grass to die and I have to replace it. And secondly, I don't want to be contacted by the HOA saying, hey, your grass is tall at this property. And then I just got to follow up. But, all these things that I say, they're minor things, and they're, you could find a way to protect yourself from it as well. Because really, like, for example, the lawn care thing, I could bake in an extra $25-$30 a month for rent and just hire someone to cut it all the time, right? Yeah. I could do that, and it would avoid that headache. But I kind of don't want to do that because I want it to be affordable for them, and if they want to cut their own grass, things like that. So all these things, like you could find a solution for any of these problems, but it's just things to be mindful of.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So I guess going to you, like, what are your thoughts on finding like this ideal tenant? Like how do you find? And it's ideal to have someone that's gonna be a good tenant, but also stay there for a very long time, right? Like the turnaround is really a negative thing. And so if you have someone for multiple years, that's a good tenant. Like that's an ideal situation, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Or do you have any advice?
I just tell them to be a good tenant when I get.
Oh, okay. All right.
No,
I should try that.
You should ask them nicely. That'll help.
You're smart. That's good.
No, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but that agent is crucial, right? I think we mentioned on a couple episodes about how the agent, not just from acquiring the property, but also helping you finding a tenant. They will, they know the people to look for, the people to not look for. Right. They have the experience in that, because you got to think as a new investor and you're trying to place. I've seen a lot of people put in, for rent by owner, right, and trying to rent their own house out, and they don't know the screening process. They don't know what to look for, because some of these guys they've been in the game a long time, meaning the renters. They've been through a few properties and they know the game and they know how to get into a property and possibly mess it up.
So let me chime in on that, because that's exactly what happened to me. Like now I exclusively use my realtor to be the agent to find tenants, because the one time I didn't, it was like one of those situations where someone moved in, they were great, but then a life situation happened, so they had to move out, which, I understand, things happen. And then I was like, man, I just paid my realtor the 1 month's fee to move someone in, right? And I'm like, let me just try my luck. Let me just try. So I put the sign up, and then, I'm not exaggerating, like hundreds of calls every day or text. Hey, can I move in? How much is the rent? Oh, that's too much, blah, blah, blah. And I'm all like, what are you talking about? And so like, you have to field those calls. That's one thing, right? Yeah. And then you hone it down to like a certain amount of people. And then you have to like screen all of them. And it's a full-time job. Like to me, it was a full-time job, and I work full-time. So I don't have the time to really filter out and say, hey, this is the ideal tenant. And that was my worst tenant. Like always paid late, always lied about things. It was just crazy. And so ever since that experience, it was like, all right, well, I still want to be in the real estate game. I still want to be a landlord, but that's when you realize like, hey, let's pay the professionals to do the job right.
See, I think some of that, I mean, I think you've said so many good things in that statement, in the sense that you've learned from experience. Obviously, you have to dive in, get in, and make those mistakes, but it's a small mistake. I mean, you went through a few months of just getting late rent, right? And then you're able to get right back on the boat and say, hey, I'm not going to go down that path again.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use an agent this time. So which again, having an agent, they know, most agents or that are seasoned in the rental game know the screening process. The screening process is, making sure you get your background checks, paycheck stubs, just kind of going through the whole background check of, there's in certain areas you may go a little bit more lenient on your clientele depending on where you're renting. If you're renting in a rough neighborhood, that's kind of the clientele you're going to get applicant wise. So I think that screening is essential. The agents that we use are very thorough in their process and finding the best that they can find. So long as you can wait, right? And that's the other thing. As long as you keep the house on the market, you'll get more and more applicants. And then there's seasons for this too. So there's the high time summer where you get a lot of applicants. Maybe the winter you may go taper down a little bit, but that background check, making sure they have an adequate, pay history is super important whenever you're looking at that. And it gets kind of sketchy now because, especially with COVID, and I kind of think about that now because, a lot of people are in between jobs and you don't know, what you can kind of trust, and you just have to be really do a little bit more background research on those items.
Right, for sure. And so I totally agree on that, especially in the season we're in now. But again, it goes back to the whole agent knowing what are the tricks of the trade. Like there are things that he does that I would never even thought of to do, like even like going and doing a pop-up visit to where they currently live to see how are you living? Like, are you as clean as you claim to be, or, like going and calling like their employers.
Yep.
Like that, to be honest, that was something I knew I should have done, but I didn't do because I didn't have time.
Yeah.
Because I'm busy doing other things, and so because I missed out on that, like it bit me in the butt. It's one of those things where it's like you drop the ball on something and it'll come back to get you.
Apartments do it all day. They do reference checks all day. They actually ask for a list of, hey, give me two or three good references, even prior landlords, whatever. Call them, figure it out, and find out if what they're saying is true. I mean, second goes to kind of like upkeeping and maintenance on requests on your property. Again, I think a lot of this has to be a part of, make sure you're setting the precedents up front, right? So when you put in your processes, you find the right tenant, you say, hey, Sergeant Abraham is going to be the one that I want in this house. I think you have to outline exactly how you want them to handle everything from payment to requests, and make sure it's open there for you they have an open communication or a line of communication to reach you to kind of get those tasks done, because you're basically setting the process for them. And I think that's going to be essential to kind of keeping and maintaining a good tenant. And if they know they can reach to you and you're and it's a two-way street, you have to make sure that you're giving that service back to them. If they're telling you something, make sure you at least respond to it, give them a timeline on when you can repair it. Those kind of things I think will help keep a relationship with the tenant and landlord going, as well as the maintenance and the upkeep of the house.
Right, man. Like you hit it on the nail, man. Like it's exactly like I 100% agree, because it's like there's this feeling of like, oh, I'm the landlord, and so whatever I say goes. And it's like, no, it's really a relationship. Like you're providing something for someone, but they're also your client, so you want to take care of them as well, right? And so like, you said it perfectly. Like you're setting the precedent. So if you're quick to do repairs when they have an issue, and if you're quick to respond when they have like something going on, it kind of sets the pace to say like, hey, you see me doing this for you, so I expect you to do the same for me. It's, just common courtesy, right? And so like you have to be a kind person. You have to be, firm. Like I tell my tenants all the time, like I do everything based off of the four corners of this lease agreement that we both agreed on. You read it, I read it, and so this is what we're going to go everything off of. And so I'm firm in that, but at the same time, like I'm trying to be very responsive and just on top of things when it comes to like communicating with them, because I know I want that too.
And just to add on to that, again, a tight contract or a tight leasing contract is important to that. right? That is that is the foundation of it. Whether it's, you kind of touch on lawn care, but I actually write that in my lease contract. I say,
Oh yeah.
lawns have to be maintained by you, watered in the summertime, on certain, at least 1 to 2 times a week. Those items are built in there for protection for them and for you. Obviously, from a rental aspect, late fee aspect, you can always lean back on that contract and say, hey, it's outlined here for you for these reasons.
No, I totally agree. There were so many times where I said, "Oh, item 17B in the lease agreement, it says da 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 da," and so there's nothing else that you could rebuttal, right?
Mm-hmm.
When this is an agreement that you signed, I signed it, so we both agreed to it. And
Yeah.
so, like, if you have a question for it, and it's not like it's like throwing it in their face, but it's like just for abundant clarity. Like now we know where we stand, we know who's supposed to take care of what, and so we just move forward accordingly.
I mean, just as humans, like you say, that mutual respect, if you build that up front, I think that helps a lot in most cases, right? If you're helping them take care of the house or they're helping you reporting the issues, when it comes to rent, and if they're late a little bit, you explain to them, these are the late fees, they will abide by it because they know you set that precedence, right? It's
Sure.
if you show them a little bit of, disrespect by not hearing them on certain things, they may feel the same way when it comes to, when they need you, right? So we have to kind of treat them as good people, not as, it's not that relationship building is very important in the beginning of it. And I think that trickles down into, if that relationship is there, they're not going to want to move, obviously, right? You're maintaining a good shelter for them to stay in and their family. That'll build them from, having so many turnovers, and you're not paying money to clean the house out and get a new person in there. You're building longevity and protection for yourself, and look at it as a two-way street. I know a lot of people think of just, oh, I'm the owner, you're the tenant. You can't look at it that way, is what I've learned.
Sure. Like you said, it's mutually beneficial. Like you take care of me, you take care of my house, and I'll take care of the house as well, so that way you have a good place to live. I mean, like it's a win-win on both sides. Because I mean, from what I've been experiencing, like families that rent, they don't want to move all the time. Like, they want to have like stability and to be able to say, like, this is my home, like this is where my kids are growing up, and this is like I know the neighbors down the street and things like that. So yeah, it's very important to just be good people.
100%. Just being kind, I think, is the underroot of this thing. It's crazy, but I think that ultimately will just get you a long-term tenant. I mean, as long as you do your due diligence, right? People go through so much stuff. I mean, nobody's been through a pandemic. Nobody's been through, there's going to be job losses that happen that's unexpected. I think at the end of the day, if you're just kind and humane to everything you do, right, including investors and investing and the people that are helping you build your wealth, I think that ultimately will set the pace and tone for both parties.
For sure. I 100% agree.
Anything else, Saj? I mean, what else? Is there anything else you can add to, or before we wrap up the show? I know this is it's a pretty short one. It's pretty easy. There's some of the things that we kind of went over, but that's it in a nutshell on our end.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. Like it's not rocket science. I mean, all of real estate, like being a landlord and doing this stuff, it's really not rocket science. Like it's just be kind to people, be smart. I mean, as far as like do the due diligence you need to do the background, like don't be afraid to work, dig a little bit deeper when you need to dig a little bit deeper. But at the end of the day, they're human beings. Like we're all people, and we want to be treated, properly. And so if you do that, like you really can't go wrong.
Yeah. And trust in God, but lock your car. I always rely on that. I feel like that statement blankets everything, because it's like, you don't want to, you have two tenants here. You have one with a criminal background with murder and this and that. Of course, you're not going to put them into your house. You screen them out based on certain, but if you have somebody else that has a cleaner history and kind of find that right balance. If you're doing your due diligence up front, that's going to save you. That's going to be that much more risk that you're going to avoid. But there's going to be the unexpected side too. You just got to expect that.
For sure. And so, well, I guess on that same note, let's say there is a tenant that has a colored history, right? Where it's, like things have happened in the past. And I've recently dealt with this too, like where, like, I don't know, like they've done this and this in the past, but like they went out of their way to explain themselves and really like hey, I know this looks bad. And I was like, okay, I'm glad you acknowledge the fact that it looks bad. But let me show you when this happened, why it happened, how I resolved it, how I've reformed from it. And so like they've set so many layers of like comfort for me to be able to say, you know what, you deserve a chance. You deserve to be treated right and to have a good place to live for you and your kids and all that stuff. And so I gave it to them, like trusting that, they could do the right thing. But you have to see that from that person, right? If it's just on paper, of course you're going to say criminal, non-criminal. Okay, I'll take the non-criminal, right? But like there's also a chance for redemption is what I'm trying to say. Like, give people the space to be able to explain themselves. And if you feel comfortable, go for it, because everyone deserves a second chance. But like you said, trust in God, lock your cars.
There's ways to screen them. There's a bunch of different things you could do, and those are little tips and tricks for sure. Make sure you do your due diligence. But at the end of the day, there's some risk in any investment you go through. So don't let it deter you. I think it's going to be the other big thing to take away from it. We've had so many people. I believe there's so many people that have touched on real estate, got a bad taste, and they went back out. But just stay diligent, stay focused, and if this is the goal that you want to do, continue on with it, and trust me, you're going to be successful. It's something that it's very forgiving, and we always say this. There's a lot of room to make errors, but there's a lot of room for success as well, or even more room for success.
Yeah, there's way more room for success. Like there's a lot of people. Failures do happen, and I get it, but it's easier to bounce back if you're taking the right steps, right? If you map things out, and if you're like a diligent person in general, you'll be fine with real estate. Like, I mean, I would highly recommend anybody to at least start doing the research. That's free. Like, just to be able to like get a feel for like, what would this look like if I did it, So all these things that we talk about, like, it might sound scary, like dealing with tenants and things like that. Like, those are things that are issues, and, those are headaches that come across, but everything is figure outable.
With that said, we're going to wrap up this week's episode, guys. Thanks for joining. As always, feel free to comment. Let us know how we did. If you have anything that you have of concern, feel free to comment. We'll always respond, and continue to tune in, and hope you have a good rest of the week. Take care, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajin. Be sure to tune in next time.